Nyamewaa, we're just setting up, finishing setting up, and then we're going to get started. Just want to send out a couple of messages. And we're going to put up a couple of links for you to check out. Okay, we're just setting up real quick. We just had a couple more things to take care of right here, and then we're gonna get started. In the meantime, can somebody send me a message in the chat? Let me know you can hear me clearly. Just send me a message right quick. Let me know you can hear and see clearly, and we're gonna send out another message, and then we're gonna get started. And also, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat at any time. All right, but just send it. If you all can send it, somebody send a message just so you can know, so I can know that you can hear me good. And you need to log in if you want to send a message in the chat, interact in the social stream. You have to log in. All right, so I'm gonna send out one more message, and then we're gonna get started. Alright, cool, so you can hear me good. Alright, so Nyamewaa, Medinde, Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akan, Eneye, Benada, AKANFO, NANASOM, De. That means, greetings, my name is Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akan. I'm the Odwirafo of Akwamu Mine, Amadukai Tifi Mu, which is the Akwamu Nation in North America. This is our AKANFO NANASOM, or Ancient, Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion series, broadcast. What we're going to do today is we're going to build on the last few broadcasts that we did with respect to the creative Abosom, and this will be the final piece in that series. And what we did initially was we started off with the 3-part series, NANASOM Ne Amamre, which is ancestral religion and culture. We talked about the nature and function of the Supreme Being and the Okrawa, the divine consciousness, the soul, in relationship to our function in the world, and the Abosom and Nsamanfo, ancestral spirits and deities. The next piece we did was dealing specifically with the nature and function of the Abosom in Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut ancestral religion. Then we talked about the Nsamanfo. Then we did an 11-part series on the Akradin Bosom, which is the Abosom, the deities, the spirit forces in nature that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the Akan 7-day week. We also talked about, in the next piece, Asaase Afua and Asaase Ya, which is the Earth Mother, the Two Earth Mother Abosom in Akan culture. Then we went to creative Abosom, and we were dealing with, we talked about Nyankopon and Nyankonton, the creator and the creatress in Akan culture, who are called Ra and Ra'et in ancient Kemet and Kanit, Nubia, Egypt and Nubia. We talked about Odomankoma, who is called Atem or Atem Kepra in ancient Kemet. We also talked about Tweduampon, who is called Kepra in ancient Kemet. And we also talked about Oboade, who is called Ptah in ancient Kemet. So we were going through these creative Abosom, these higher level Abosom, who are the mothers and fathers of the next level Abosom. The reason why we focused on those creative powers is because very often, specifically in Akan culture, but just across the board, when you're trying to learn something about Akan culture, Akan cosmology, what ends up happening is you'll read books, listen to people who are either initiated into the so-called priesthoods or priestesshoods, whether they are here in America, in the Western Hemisphere, or on the continent, and they have been infected with the idiocy of monotheism. So they have taken specific Abosom, specific deities, forces in nature that are children of the Supreme Being, and they have conflated them all into simply names and titles of the Supreme Being, attempting to force fit our culture into the idiocy of monotheism. There's nothing intelligent about monotheism. There's nothing true about it. There's a God, there's a goddess, and there are many gods and goddesses who are children of the great God and the great goddess. Monotheism is, as we always said, the product of the inferior mind of the Caucasian. They are incapable of communicating with the Supreme Being, with the Great Mother and the Great Father. They can't communicate with the Abosom, the forces in nature, the Orisha, the Vodou. They can't communicate with the honorable ancestresses and ancestors of Afuraitkaitnut who work with the Abosom. They can't communicate with any divine force in creation. So therefore, they don't want us to communicate with any divine force in creation. They want us to worship them. This is why they put out, created the whole false traditions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, all these different pseudo-religions, so that we would leave our ancestral traditions, not align ourselves with the Supreme Being and be guided by divine order, but that we would begin to worship and follow them so that they could be in control. After having invaded our continent, as well as Southern Europe and Southern Asia, where we were, after we had migrated from Afuraitkaitnut, we occupied Southern Europe, the so-called Middle East, Southern Asia, and of course ancient North, Central, and South America and the Caribbean, thousands of years before non-Afurakanu, non-Afuraitkaitnut, or the whites and their offspring existed on Earth. We were in these various places, starting from Afuraitkaitnut, Africa, and migrating to these various regions. So the whites and their offspring, after having come into being, began to invade the various centers of civilization, of Afuraitkaitnut civilization. They waged war militarily for thousands of years. They typically got crushed by us militarily for thousands of years. So after thousands of years of attempting to take control of the societies through force, which they were unsuccessful with, they began to try to corrupt the ancestral religion, and even that took them over a millennia, going on 2 millennia before they got to the point where they were able to control a certain amount, percentage of the minds of the people. And typically what happened was, it wasn't that they just brought in this false doctrine and our people fell for it. They tried that as well. That didn't work. So what they had to do was take up residence in certain areas of our civilizations or on the outskirts of our civilizations, try to engage in trade and commerce, take note of when certain groups became disgruntled with the leadership, and when there was internecine warfare, when there was civil war, and then they would jump on one side and assist one side, often the weaker side, to overthrow the stronger side, and the condition would be that they would have to be given some form of control once the new society was established. And some of our people would go along with that to get their historical or true historical quote-unquote enemies off of their backs, and they would allow the whites and their offspring to gain some control in certain areas after wars were won. That's how they were able to incrementally gain access to the minds of some of our people, and it went from there. So, and we talked about that in the different webcasts. We've touched on that. But because of that, some of our people began to incorporate the idiocy of monotheism. And that has gone on not for just 1,000 years, but even coming into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, Europe, where Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut are today starting to re-engage their culture, re-embrace their ancestral religions, re-embrace their ancestral traditions, their customs, practices. We have an ancestral mandate to do so. So we're naturally drawn and led by our Unsamanfo, guided by our Unsamanfo, our ancestresses and ancestors, to re-embrace the culture. So we start trying to find as much information as possible. We tune into them. We're guided to different people. We look up information on the internet. We read books and so forth. But typically, when you're looking at Akan tradition, as well as Yoruba and Igbo and Vodun and different traditions, you will see that the academics, whether they're continental or they're from here, of course the whites and their offspring will lie about the culture and try to force the whole notion of monotheism, and also try to teach that our culture is primitive and so forth. But the black so-called academics, continental as well as non-continental, will promote the same false information. And that leads to a corruption of the culture, a truncating of the cosmology, and we want to break that up. So when we started talking about Oboade and Odomankoma and Tweduampon and Nyankopon and Nyankonton, we were showing that these are actually Abosom. They are not simply names of the Supreme Being. They are separate forces in creation that are subordinate to and servants of Nyamewaa and Nyame. So those are the major ones that you often read about, because these are major Abosom in creation, and we talked about their role in creation. We dealt with those first just to dispel the myth that they are anything more than Abosom, that they are just simply names of the Supreme Being. And once we did that, we want to move forward and talk about the Supreme Being. We want to talk about Nyamewaa and Nyame, Amenet and Amen. Okay, before we get started, any other questions? Okay, I see that. Okay, you all can hear me. That's good. Okay, any questions before on the previous information, before we get started with Nyamewaa and Nyame? And if you look at the stream, before we got started, I typed in a few names, and you can Google those names. You'll see Nyame, Nyambe, Nzame, Nyamewaa, Nyame, Njambe, Zambi, and so forth. So you can Google those. You can download some of the information, and I also put up a couple of links to the website for people who are not familiar. Okay, so in our Akan culture, the great god is Nyame, the great goddess is Nyamewaa. The great mother and the great father, Nyamewaa and Nyame, are the Supreme Being. They are the male and female complementary opposites, two individual entities that function together as a unit, and they comprise the Supreme Being. The reason why we must function together as male and female, as two halves of a complementary whole in balance in order to produce a child, is because we are descended directly from Nyamewaa and Nyame, and that is the order of creation. That's Nyamewaa and Nyame in Sheshye, divine order. There's Nyamewaa and Nyame have always been. Now the whites and their offspring, they would say something like that is paradoxical. It's a philosophical conundrum. They can't understand that because they are not connected to the Supreme Being. They have no connection, no conscious connection, no spiritual connection to divinity. So it's incomprehensible to them. And the same thing with Asians and white Hindus and so-called pseudo-Native Americans and so forth is incomprehensible to them as well. But we are direct descendants of Nyamewaa and Nyame. We are Okra, or Okrawa, our Ka and Kayet. Our soul is taken directly from the Ka and Kayet of Nyamewaa and Nyame. So we have a direct connection that we can use to tune into the reality of creation and these two great beings. Nyamewaa and Nyame, or Amenet and Amen, are not just representative of a hierarchy of energies. They're not just an abstract principle. They're not just a plasma of energy that we do ritual to, access some power, manipulate it, and use it for our best interest. We do not anthropomorphize energy to manufacture a concept of a deity. These are real, conscious, living, reasoning entities from which we get our consciousness and our capacity to live and capacity to reason and think and function and so forth. It's the whites and their offspring who put forth the foolish notion that as a human being you can be conscious, you can be intelligent, you can be reasoning, you can be thinking, you can be acting, you can be creative, you can be innovative, but the Supreme Being can't be that. Only human beings can be that, and maybe animals, but there can't be any other forces in nature that can think and reason, because the whites and their offspring would like to promote the false notion that they are superior because they want to enslave the minds of people. These are the enslavers when we've allowed them to infect our culture. The reality is Nyamewaa and Nyame are the great mother and the great father. They communicate directly to Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people, and only Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people, and they communicate with us directly through our Ka and Kayet, or in Akan, as we call it, the Okra and the Okrawa. In Yoruba, it's the Ori Inu. In Vodun, it's the Se Lido, and so forth. Our divine consciousness, we have a direct connection to Nyamewaa and Nyame. Now, when we talked about Anansi, Awuku, Kweku Anansi, the great divine messenger, the Abosom, and Akan culture that governs the planet Aku, or Awuku, which in English is called Mercury. This messenger, he's also considered a trickster. He's called Set in ancient Kemet. He's called Eshu in the Yoruba tradition, Legba in Vodun. Awuku is often shown as Anansi, the spider. And we talked about in the webcast about Anansi that when you see a spider sitting on a windowsill, you can come back days later and you will see that the spider has woven a web that permeates the entire empty space of the open window. And now the spider can move to any point in that empty space, stop, move, and govern all the roads of that web. Anansi is the same thing as Anansi Kokroko, the great spider, the great divine force in nature that's the communicator between Nyamewaa and Nyame and us. He weaves a divine web of Tumi, or spiritual power, that permeates the black substance of space, and he's able to govern all the roads of that web. So just like you have a nervous system, which is like the worldwide web in your body, and Anansi, Awuku, Eshu governs that system, carrying messages from the brain to every region of the body, and messages from every region of the body back to the brain. Just like Anansi goes from heaven to earth, Osoro to Asaase, to carry the messages from Nyamewaa and Nyame to the people, and the prayers of the people to Nyamewaa and Nyame. In the same fashion, he weaves a web of energy, Tumi, that permeates all the black substance of space, and one of those ends of the web are connected to the head of every Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut person, is connected to our Kra, and of course our entire nervous system. So we have a direct line of energy from the Kra directly to Nyamewaa and Nyame. But since that web is expansive, it's also connected to other created entities in the universal order, which means plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut human life, and Afuraitkaitnut human life only. So we have a direct connection. When we hear about people talking about ancient Afuraitkaitnut ancestral religion, and they say very often, and they simply repeat what a certain group of Europeans wrote about in the so-called 1800s, what we would call the 12,800s, 12,900s, when they were first writing about ancestral practices amongst Afuraitkaitnut people. They would say that the great god, they usually leave the goddess out, and they would say the great god is too busy and not concerned about the affairs of the human beings. That's why the great god created the deities, the Abosom, the lesser gods, as they would say, the Orisha, and we communicate directly with the Orisha and the ancestresses and ancestors because we don't have a direct connection or communication with the Supreme Being, and the Supreme Being doesn't directly communicate with us. The Supreme Being communicates through the Abosom. That's not accurate. We communicate with the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou. We also have a direct connection to Nyamewaa and Nyame, and we communicate directly with Nyamewaa and Nyame on a daily basis. When they talk about, and of course they leave out the female and they only focus on the male. Now you'll see this written in journals, books, internet. You'll see it written by continental Afuraitkaitnut people here in America who are repeating that same information when they're talking about ancient Kemet and ancient Kanit, ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia. They'll say the same thing about the great Supreme Being. They'll say that the Supreme Being wasn't worshipped, didn't have any active worship going on, basically a figurehead, and people focused on the divinities. When you look, if you do the research yourself, when you look in ancient Kemet, you will see that there are priests and priestesses of Amen, and of course of Amenet. In Akan culture, you'll see that when they say there were no shrines or temples to Nyame, to the Supreme Being, only to the, and no offerings given to the Supreme Being, only to the Abosom, to the lesser divinities. When you look in the culture, you'll see that's also false. In every region, in traditional Akan culture, you would see that they had a staff, what is called Nyame Dria, which is Nyame's stick or staff, and it has 3 prongs and a vessel on top, and offerings would be put inside the Nyame Dria for the Supreme Being. We had direct worship of Nyamewaa and Nyame. In Akan culture, we have that, and we had it in ancient Kemet and Knesset as well. So those, those things that you read about, you have to look at the culture yourself. It's in the text. When people talk about Amen and Amen Ra, but they don't talk about Amenet or Amenet Ra'et, that's what they're saying. But if you look at the text, you'll see that from the very beginning, the oldest texts as far as composition dealing with cosmology are what are called the texts of the Meru or the pyramids. And those earliest texts, which are the earliest religious compositions that have so far been found in the world, you will find Amen and Amenet together from the very beginning and all the way through the end, all the way through all of so-called pre-dynastic Kemet, all the way through so-called dynastic Kemet into ancient Nubia, and across the board, across the continent. You will find the Great Mother and the Great Father together from the beginning. So we can't listen to the whites and their offspring, or black people, whether they're Negro scholars or some Afrocentric scholars who have simply imitated what the whites and their offspring have said, and they begin to, or they continue that process of perpetuate that misinformation that we are dealing with monotheism, as though monotheism is superior and polytheism is inferior. That was the first step for the whites and their offspring to begin to denigrate our culture, was to first say that polytheism was inferior. The next step was to say, of course, that the different divinities didn't exist at all, and then the final step was to make the one fake divinity a white divinity and make us worship the fake white one God that the whites and their offspring placed themselves as the representatives on earth of that divinity. So that was a process, and when people who are considering themselves cultural or African-centered or Afrocentric, and they repeat that misinformation. They're perpetuating the process of misinformation that the whites and their offspring started by denigrating the culture. The most direct way we can understand who Nyamewaa and Nyame, or Mawu and Lisa, or Chukwu and Komosu, or Olorun and Olokun, or Kolotielo and Katieleo in Senufo tradition, the Great Mother and Great Father are, the most direct way, of course, is to deal directly with them ritually. And we can do that through the agency of our cry. Now let me give you a link to the, hold on one second, because we're going to mention this throughout the piece. We recently published a book called the Okra Complex, The Soul of AKANFO, and you can just go to our website and you can download that. It's a PDF book, it's a free download, so we'll be referencing that throughout the text, throughout the presentation. So first let's deal with, just touch again on the cosmology, dealing with Amenet, Amen, and then we're going to deal with how Amenet and Amen show up in traditional cultures. Today, contemporary Afuraitkaitnut, and then we'll go into some more information. If you have any questions, just hit them up on the chat. So, as we spoke about before, Amen and Amenet are the great being. The root of the term Amen can mean hidden, but it also means stable, fixed, permanent, and abiding. So Amen and Amenet are the great hidden being, the great permanent being, that great hidden being that's stable, permanent, fixed, and abiding. The supreme being is male and female functioning together as one unit. Now, just as you can employ your consciousness to generate thought forms in the darkness of your mind, or if you're asleep or laying down in a dark room, you can generate colorful images. When you're dreaming, your eyes are closed, it's dark, but you can generate colorful geometric forms that have life, movement, and so forth. You have the capacity to do that. You can have the capacity to stop that process. The reason you have that capacity is because Nyamewaa and Nyame, Amenet and Amen have that same capacity. When they decided they wanted to create the universe, they employed their consciousness to begin to generate the forms of things that would eventually come into being physically. In order to do that, they gave birth to a male and female abosom in ancient Kemet called Ka and Kaet, often Kaka and Kakaet. They manifest physically in the black substance of space, the all-pervasive black substance of space. Ka and Kaet are the male and female terms for soul, divine consciousness. So when they gave birth to these two entities, they directed these forces to generate forms, images, ideas, and so forth. They employ those forces to do that, just like you can employ your consciousness to generate forms. You can employ your consciousness to shut down those images and go back to black. So they gave birth to Ka and Kaet, divine consciousness, the male and female forces of soul in the creative universe. In order for the forms that were generated to be given life at some point, they had to, Amen and Amenet had to give birth to divinities that can create the expansive and contractive energy necessary to animate these forms, similar to the breathing process. So they gave birth to two more entities, Hehu and Hehut. Those are the entities of boundlessness, eternity, but Hehu also means breath. It also means heat. So when you expand and contract, Hehu, Hehu, and these are the names of the divinities, like the breathing process, that expansion and contraction is the animating force that will eventually begin to generate heat. And when you begin to generate heat, the waters of the blackness of space begin to vibrate. And we always use the analogy of a pot of water on the stove. If you have that just plain pot of water, there's nothing happening. But once you begin to expand and contract within that pliable substance, you begin to see waves, and then the waves eventually begin to vibrate so rapidly that they give birth to spheres of heat, and then the spheres eventually rise up, and then they pop, of course. So Amen, Amenet are the great hidden being within that pliable substance, which we would call Ka and Kayet, when they cause the expansion and contraction process, the Hehu and the Hehu, the breathing process. They cause the waves of energy to begin to move within that watery substance, that watery black substance. That gives birth to the wave energy of Nu and Nut. And that energy begins to connect and like a kinetic force and give birth to spheres of heat, which eventually became stars, the stars rising up out of the black substance of space. So we talk about that in Nyankopon and Nyankonton article, and as well as the Odomankoma article. And we also use the analogy of a male and a female, an Afurakanu male, Afuraitkaitnut female. The male is like Amen, the female is like Amenet. Within the male and female body, we have a black substance where the organs and all the systems within which are contained. That black substance is our Kanut, is our melanin, is our abatum. The Ka in the male, the Kayet in the female. We have the capacity to expand and contract through the breathing process to get our energy moving. That's the He and Hehu within us. And then our energy starts to move and we can send it to different parts of our bodies. That's the Nu and the Nut within us. At some point, that energy is so rapid and so powerful that it begins to heat us up. It's like fire explodes from us. And that's the Ra and Ra'et energy, and we can direct our Ra and Ra'et energy when we unite, directed to get together and create a child, procreate. So these are the different forces of nature as they manifest in our bodies, and they're of course directly descended from the great, what they call the Kemenu, or the 8, sometimes called the Agdua, the 8 primordial divinities. Now when you're reading different texts, again, we said the earliest texts, Amen and Amenet, are there in the Meru, the pyramid text, from the beginning. Later on, when they're starting to, in ancient Kemet, when they start to give a more extensive exposition of the different aspects of the cosmology, they talk about the Kemenu, the Abosom, or the divinities of Kemenu, the primordial 8 divinities. These are the 8 divinities they're talking about: Amen, Amenet, Ka and Kayet, often called Kaka and Kakayet, Hehu and Hehut, and Nu and Nut. And those 8 divinities, through their interaction, eventually give birth to Ra and Ra'et, who rise up out of the darkness for the first time as spheres of light and give birth to stars, and stars give birth to planets, and Ra and Ra'et move through the planets and activate these new spheres and cause separation and development. And of course, our planet, that happened with our planet, and we talk about that whole process and the origin of the term Afuraitkaitnut and so forth. What often is missed when we're talking about these cosmologies is that Amen and Amenet give birth to Ka, Kayet, Hehu and Hehut, Nu and Nut. They're not just representations of primordial consciousness that have been anthropomorphized. Again, Amen and Amenet are the Great Mother and the Great Father and Great Mother, and they give birth to these divinities. Some texts you will find that spelled out, and others it's not explicit, but for example, in what they call the Leiden Papyrus, they talk about how Amen first existed in the forms of the primordial 8 and completed them and then created the world. They talk about Amen as Wati, and they say, often they translate that, they mistranslate it as soul or one who doesn't have a second, the one God, the only God, and so forth, because they're translating the term Wa or Wati as a descriptive title, meaning soul or one. Now the term Wa does mean one, but Wati means one in the sense of unique or different from the others. Not one in the sense that there is no other God before this particular God. This is not biblical, it's not Quranic. When they say Wati, dealing with Amen, they're talking about he is the unique one as the great God, and no other, he has no second in the sense that he's the greatest one, not that he's the only one. It's the same kind of title that is given to Akan, Oheni, and Ohema, kings and queen mothers. They would be called the unique one, none other are like them. The same thing with the Nisut or the Ptah, the pharaohs, the kings and queen mothers in ancient Kemet. They will be called Wati, meaning the unique one. There's none other in the realm like them, and of course there's none other who has the function in the society that they have. It doesn't mean that they're superior to other people, but they have a specific function to execute, and they were born to execute that function, so there's none like them in the region, in the realm at that particular time. So that we want to dispel the notion of when you read these texts, and that's why it's important to study language. They often mistranslate to try to force you back into monotheism. So if you're reading along and it says Amen-Ra, he's the one God, none other is like him, he was born without a second and so forth, they're talking about he's the unique one amongst the other divinities. He's the high one amongst the other divinities, and so is Amenet. Now we have pictures of Amen and Amenet in different parts of the website. Various articles that we have. We always show a picture of Amen and Amenet either sitting together, standing together. There are many images of them all over ancient Kemet from various time periods during dynastic, so-called dynastic trustery or true history. Now the reason why we show that, of course, is to drive home the point that they are actual divinities. They are two separate entities that function together as one unit. We communicate with Amenet in Nyamewaa as our great mother, and she communicates with us. We communicate with Nyame, Amen, and he communicates back to us. That's part of our culture. We've always had that in our culture. They're not abstract. Now we're going to get into how Nyame and Nyamewaa was carried over into West Afuraitkaitnut, South, and Central. But before we get into that, we have any questions so far on that? Okay. And if you have any questions, just put them up on the chat. So, hold on one second. Okay. So when you look at Amen and Amenet in ancient Kemet, you can also, when you look down into south of Kemet, into Nubia, into Kanit, you'll see that the priests and priestesses had a strong presence dealing with Amen and Amenet in Nubia. It didn't begin in ancient Kemet and later become transferred down into Nubia. Nubia or Kanit, in fact the term Kanit or Kanat means the first land, the south land, the headland, the front land. That's the term that was used to describe that land. It was the first, the head, the front, and then Kemet comes later. So we began as a civilization in the region of Kanit, which is now Sudan and South Sudan, and then later, thousands of years later, we migrated, some of our people migrated up into Kemet, and then we established ancient Kemet, and some of our people migrated further into what is, back then was called Kanana, and different names, which is now Israel and Palestine and Syria and places like that. We established civilization there and carried the same ancestral religion. So you will see stelae dedicated to Amen all the way up in Syria. We also went east, and then we went west. So we carried the culture. Of course, wherever we migrated, we practiced our ancestral religion. Of course, it's the only true religion with its various expressions amongst Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people. There were no other fake religions yet before the whites and their offspring began to manufacture corruptions of our traditions, to manufacture fake religions. So we carried our traditions, of course, wherever we went. Southern Europe, so-called Middle East, Southern Asia, and then into North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean. We, of course, building pyramids in what they call ancient Mexico, the Olmec societies, in ancient Peru and the southern part of the United States. Various civilizations carrying the same culture. Now, when you look at ancient Nubia, ancient Kanit, you will see that great temples to Amen were created. You'll see that the priests and priestesses said that their lineage came from, when they migrated, first we were in Kanit, we went up into ancient Kemet, we established civilization there. Some of our people remained in Kanit, some people remained in Kemet during the dynastic, so-called dynastic trucery. Some of those people, because of invasions, migrated back into Kanit from Kemet because of invasions of the Persians, the Assyrians, and the Persians, and the Greeks and the Romans and so forth. Some of those priests and priestesses who were originally from Kanit moved up into, their lineages moved up into Kemet, and then later they went back to reestablish civilization in ancient Kanit. They would talk about their lineage coming from those same priests and priestesses of Amen from ancient Kemet. They were the same people. They weren't just, often you'll read about the Nubians, the Ethiopians copying or being enculturated by the people of ancient Kemet. In reality, they were the same people. In fact, they were the progenitors and progenitresses of the people of ancient Kemet. So when they migrated up, some of them migrated back south and reestablished civilization, built pyramids, of course. Meru had the greatest shrine to Amen anywhere in the world, which is the great mountain, which they call now Jebel Barakal. And when the Ptah, or the kings of ancient Kemet, will come down to ancient Nubia and see Jebel or Gebel Barakal, they saw that as the original seat of Amen and Amenet within the actual landscape, that huge mountainous geological feature. They saw that as a sacred mountain of Amen, and they would go there to have coronation rites performed in ancient Kanit, even though they were kings of ancient Kemet. So all that to say, once that took place, thousands of years passed, some of our people migrate away from ancient Kanit, ancient Nubia, ancient Kemet, and then we migrate west after the collapse of ancient Kemet with the invasions of the Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, and later Arabs. Now, some of our people had already migrated west, were in the region of what is now called Libya, the ancient black Berber people, before the whites and their offspring invaded and corrupted some of the blood circles, producing the very light skin, some of the very light skinned Berbers that you see now. But the black Berbers who still exist, they rarely show pictures of them because they're constantly trying to force this image of Berbers being Arabs. Just like in Egypt today, they typically show images of the white Arab invaders and the descendants of the invaders, as opposed to the black people who still live in Kemet in Egypt today. Most of them live in the south, and they look no different than Nigerians or Ghanaians or Zulus or whatever. But they rarely show images of them. They show the images of the invaders to represent this is what an Egyptian is. They do the same thing in India. They show the straight-haired, perverse-featured, light-skinned, melanin-deficient so-called Indians, but they don't show typically the dark-skinned, naturally brown-skinned, full lip, full nose, naturally woolly hair. Every black person in India doesn't have straight hair. There are still people who have natural hair, like in the Andean islands and so forth, who are, the original people who look no different in features, in hair, or anything, skin color, than anybody else on the continent. So they typically don't show those images of our people. They typically show the invaders' images. They do that specifically, again, with the black Berbers. They show the white invaders. But the Berbers have been in that region of what is now called Libya and other parts of North Afuraitkaitnut for thousands and thousands of years. They worship Amen, they worship Set, they worship Ifri, which is Afuraet, of course Ra, all the different divinities of ancient Kemet. We just, of course, are reestablished as we migrated west. Now, we also migrated through central, south, and into west Afuraikai. So we also carried the name of the Supreme Being with us to every place that we migrated. So what you will find is the form, for example, Nyame in Akan culture, Nyame, Nyamewaa. Ame, the root is Ame, or Amen, the great God. And Nyamewaa is Amenet, or Amenet. The root is Amen. So we're still worshiping as the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and the Great Father, Ame, or Nyame, and Nyamewaa. Now you will find versions of that name from East Afuraka, Afuraikai, through Central, South, and West Afuraka, from Tanzania all the way to Senegal across the board into Zambia. So Nyame is the way we say it in the Akan people in Ghana say it. Next door to, and the Akan people are the majority population of Ghana. It's about 45%, about 11 million Akan people in Ghana. Next door is Ivory Coast. They're about 42% of the population, the Akan people. There are about 9 million Akan people in Ivory Coast. So together there are about 20 million Akan people on the continent. They're one of the top, maybe top 5 Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut groups with regard to population on the continent. In Ghana, the Akan people refer to the Supreme Being as, for example, on the male side as Nyame. In Ivory Coast, they say Nyamewaa with a nasal N at the end. So one says Nyame, the other says Nyamewaa. Of course, it's the same title. Very often, Akan academics, as well as ritual specialists, some people are AKANFO or Osofo or whatever, Obosomfo, have been looking for the etymology of the name Nyame. Now we've exposed and shown in detail the true etymologies of Nyankopon and Nyankonton, Odomankoma, Tweduampon, Oboade, and so forth. And then also the different Kradim boson. Now we're going to give the proper etymology of Nyame. It actually comes from the root Amen. That's the piece that none of them typically understand. One of the reasons we show the images of Amen and Amenet is so when you see from the beginning that both of them existed, and there are temples for Amen and Amenet and Kemet, and sculptures and reliefs and so forth. When you get to West Afuraka, Afuraikai, for example, and you have Amen, then if you know that Amen exists and Amenet exists, and you have images of her standing next to Amen or sitting next to Amen, then you have to ask the question, well, where is she in the culture, in the cosmology, in the language? Because obviously she exists. And what you will find is that Nyame is recognized as God, Nyamewaa is goddess, but what has happened with the infection of monotheism is they've taken the title Nyamewaa as the great goddess, the female counterpart to Nyame, and then reduced her to goddess with a small lowercase g, saying that just means a female abosom, or a female force in nature. You can use the term Nyamewaa for a female force in nature, but the actual original Nyamewaa is the great mother, balancing out the great father. The same process you'll find across Afuraka, Afuraikai. You will have to look in the languages, look in the culture, for example, the Yoruba and the Igbo and so forth, and if you look deep, you will find the actual great mother, but because of the infection of monotheism, they very often have reduced her to either non-existent or being just a form of a goddess, or just being a feminine aspect of the Supreme Being, or they'll say the great God has a male and female side, and he includes all male and female, and because he creates everything. But the bottom line is they still refer to the Supreme Being as male, as one, as opposed to unique, being one being, and the feminine is just, they just pay lip service to that, but they don't deal with it. So of course, we have images of Amen and Amenet. We know who they are, we communicate with them, and we actually have that in the language as well. The root Amen and Amenet, of course, we talked about Amen meaning stable, permanent, abiding, fixed, but Amen also means hidden or concealed. Now, when we're talking about etymology, main meaning fixed, stable, and abiding, and then at the same time having the title Amen meaning hidden, if you look in the Akan language, main means to sink, to disappear, to hide oneself, and so forth. Now, Main meaning to sink and to disappear and to hide oneself, and then Amen meaning hidden. Where does that come from cosmologically? If you look at the sun rising in the east in ancient Kemet and then setting in the west is called the Amenet, or the Amenet land, the hidden land. Why is it called the hidden land? Because when the sun, the Aten, sets in the west, then it dips down below the horizon, and now the power becomes hidden, or Amen. So it is the Amen, or the hidden land. It sinks down, it disappears, it hides, it becomes hidden. So Amen means hidden in ancient Kemet, and then Mem means to sink down, hidden, to disappear in Akan culture. That is part of the root. That's a reflection of the cosmology. It's still in the same definition, the same term, and most importantly, connected to the cosmology of what the term actually means for the name of the divinity. So for hidden in ancient Kemet, and Mem meaning to sink, to disappear, to hide, and so forth. That's part of the root of Amen. Now, Amen or Main also means fixed, stable, abiding, and so forth. When the sun sets in the underworld and goes into the underworld, the power is still there. The power may be hidden, it may be imperceptible, it may seem inaccessible, but the power still exists. It's just in a different form. It's hidden or concealed from, the conscious perception. But it is always there. It's the foundation of the universe. It's the foundation of creation. It is fixed, it's stable, and abiding. So the hidden power, Amen, Amenet, are also the power that undergirds all of the created universe. So it's the only fixed, stable, and abiding power that exists in the universe. Everything else is created, comes into being, has a life, whether it's a planet or stars or plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakanu, human life. We are born, we live, we expand, we develop, we crystallize into perfection if we're engaged in proper culture, and then we make our transition and we go into another form of life through the ancestral realm. But the only fixed, permanent, stable force in creation is men. Fixed, stable, and abiding is also the hidden men force in creation, which is Amen and Amenet. So we also have the term Amen in Akan, which means to fill, to satisfy, to be full, fullness, satiation, and so forth. Now, often it's talked about with regard to if somebody eats and then they're full. But if you think about that whole concept and why it's related to Amen, Amen meaning full, satiated, and so forth, Amen and Amenet are the fullness of creation. There's nothing beyond Amen and Amenet. They are omnipresent. They permeate all aspects of the created universe and beyond the created universe. They are immanent within the universe, the created universe, and without. They are the fullness of all things. Everything exists within Amen and Amenet, just like you have trillions of cells in your body. If you recognize yourself or identify yourself like Amen and Amenet, a male and a female, then the trillions of microscopic cells that are within you, they exist within you. They don't exist outside of you. The planets, sun, moon, stars, and other entities in the created universe all exist within the blackness of Amen and Amenet. Nothing is outside of them. They are the fullness, main, as we say in Akan, of the universe. So this is where you get, if they're full and they don't need anything else because they have everything that they need, everything that's possible, because they're omnipresent, then that fullness is the same thing as something being stable or fixed. There's nothing beyond them. There's nothing that you can give to them. This is one of the reasons in reality, cosmologically, why Akan people, when we pour libation, and again we acknowledge Nyamewaa and Nyame first, again that's because we recognize them as real, conscious, living, functioning divinities, the original conscious, living, functioning spirits of creation that we are just descendant of. When we pour libation, the first thing we do is hold the vessel up, and we would say, Nana Nyame mechedi wonsu, Nyamewaa wonsu, Nana Nyamewaa mechedi wonsu, Nyamewaa wonsu, which means we show you the drink, but we do not offer you the drink. And then we start to pour libation, pour the drink into Asaase Afua, Asaase Ya, to the other Abosom, giving drink to the other Abosom, and giving drink to the NANASOM and Samanfo, the different forces in nature and the ancestral spirits that we are invoking or evoking. The reason why we show Nyamewaa and Nyame the drink, but we do not offer Nyamewaa and Nyame the drink, because we recognize that Nyame and Nyamewaa, Amen, meaning full, satisfied, fullness, they can't take any more because they have all. They are since they have everything and they are the fullness of creation, it's not possible to offer them a drink because they are the basis of all things that are created anyway. So that's just a direct cosmological connection to that whole notion of satiation, fullness, being related to what is fixed, permanent, stable, and abiding, because if you're the fullness of creation, then you're the only thing that's fixed or permanent. Everything else has to lose some energy, lose some nutrients, living things, and then gain some things back. They have to expand and contract. They have to breathe, inhale, exhale. They have to take from creation and give back to creation in order to continue. Amen and Amenet are full. Amen, they're satiated. Man, they don't have anything else to take because they're the basis of everything. Now you'll often see pictures of Amen. Sometimes his skin is dark blue, and then sometimes his skin is black. Now in Akan culture, there's a proverb that says, if you want to speak to Nyame, then say it to the wind. Now of course the wind surrounds the entire planet, and sometimes you'll see that people talk about Amen in ancient Kemet as a god of the air, and they say that because they see that he's shown, with the color blue, his skin the color blue. But what it's really saying is, just like in Akan culture, speak to the wind, Amen having blue skin shows that when you look at the sky during the day, it's blue, of course, and as far as you can see, there's blue. The blueness of the sky is the most expansive, omnipresent notion that you can see, because there's nothing further than the blue. As far as you can see, it's constant, omnipresent, expansive, infinite, and so forth. At nighttime, when the sun sets, you see the blackness, and the blackness is expansive, omnipresent. There's no beginning and no ending to the blackness as far as you can perceive. Just like during the day, there's no beginning and ending to the blue. As far as you can see, as far as you can project out, all you see is the blue. So when they show that with Amen having blue skin or black skin, depending on whether or not it's day or night, is referencing the omnipresence of the Great Father, and of course the same thing with Amenet, the omnipresence of the Great Mother. Again, that also points to that which is fixed, stable, abiding, and so forth. You can't go beyond, you can never get beyond the blackness and then find something else. It's full, it's fullness. You can never get beyond the blue during the day and find something else. There's fullness there. Okay, okay, so there was a question, can we say that Nyame is cosmic energy and creative intelligence? Well, Nyamewaa and Nyame, they give birth first to the creative intelligence, and that's Ka and Kaet. And they manifest as the black substance of space that's like the skin or the face and the body of Amenet and Amen. So they will show their bodies as blue or black. But and like us, that's our melanin, that's our Ka and our Kaet inside of our skin. We're the great invisible being within our bodies, and then our face is our dark brown colors. Amen and Amenet would be shown with blue skin or black skin. So the Ka and Kaet, the black substance of space, that's a male and female force of creative intelligence, soul, consciousness, and so forth. Now, when they employ their consciousness to generate forms in that black substance, before the planets and sun, moon, stars exist, first the forms of those things have to be generated, just like you formulate an idea in, you know, in color and geometric forms and so forth in your consciousness first, and then you grab resources to make that image physical reality. Ka and Kaet are employed or directed by Nyamewaa and Nyame as forces of divine soul, consciousness, creative intelligence to generate forms. But in order to have those forms become a reality, energy has to be given to those forms. First, Hehu and Hehut, the expansive and contractive forces of boundlessness, eternity, but also breathing, are given birth to, and they feed those forms, and then they give birth to the energy of Nu and Nut, the wavy energy that becomes the energetic substratum of everything that exists. So Nu and Nut, the weight, and their names are written in the Medutu with wavy lines showing the wave energy within the black substance, that's birthed within the black substance. Remember, if you have a pot of water that's still, if you add some heat, expansion and contraction, the still water will begin to vibrate and show waves. That's the birth of a wave form of energy. That's Nu and Nut. And those wave forms can carry energy from one part of the black substance to the other. They can transmit energy back and forth. And when Nu and Nut unite and continue that rapid waving process, they end up giving birth to spheres, which are bubbles, and spheres of heat. And inside of that heat is when they talk about Ra rising up in an egg from the black substance of space at the beginning of the universe, and it gives birth to the sun. That's no different than the bubble rising up because of the heat out of the boiling water, and then when it bursts, it releases the heat. When the egg of energy, of heat, burst, when it rose up out of the black substance, it manifested as the stars, or the first star, which we will later call, of course, our sun is a star, and so forth. So Nyamewaa and Nyame are the great being. Ka and Kaet are the divine intelligence, creative intelligence. Nu and Nut are the energetic substratum of everything that exists. They're the inert energy, the energy and potential. And then when Ra and Ra'et are given birth, they are the radiant energy of fire and light that comes forth from Nu and Nut. Okay? Alright, so we're talking about the root of the term etymologically. Nyame, the root, of course, is Amen and Amenet. One of the terms is Me, Amen, which means full or fullness. And we talked about how that's related to that which is fixed or permanent or abiding, because Amen and Amenet are the fullness of all of creation, and there's nothing that goes beyond them. But Me also means to sink, to disappear, to hide. And then in the ancient Kemet, the term Amen means hidden, or sometimes Amen is called he who is hidden, or he whose name is hidden, and so forth. So whenever they give a etymology for Amen and Kemet, they typically only mention the piece about being hidden, and he's the great hidden power. Amenet is the great hidden one. But then people who know a little bit more about the culture understand that Men, the root of it is stable, permanent, and abiding. So both of those definitions that are related, that are shown to be the etymological root of the name Amen and Amenet, you will find both of those definitions in the Akan language as the etymological root of Nyame and Nyamewaa. And they also show the cosmology. Again, Men meaning to sink, to disappear, to hide. It's talking about the sun setting in the Ament, the western region, the land of the west, and sinking down below the surface and becoming hidden, becoming the hidden power, but also the force that undergirds all things. Now you will find Nyame, you will find in, for example, the Lodzi people in Zambia, they call the supreme being Nyambe. You'll find the Herero people in central Africa, saying Nyambe. You'll find other people saying Njambe. You'll find the Koko people in Nigeria saying Nyambe. You'll find in the Congo, Nzambe. In the Fang people in Gabon and Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea, you'll find Nzame. In Senegal, you'll find Nyamewaa-Ama. So from Eastern Afuraitkaitnut, across Central, South, and West, you'll find Nyame, Nzambe, Njambe, Nyambe, Nzambi, Nzame. You'll also find Zambi, as in Zambia, which is the name of the country, named after the divinity, and the Zambezi River, the great river in that region, named after Nzambe or Nyambe or Ambe. You'll also find even Mozambique, even though they try to say it's, from an Arab title, Mozambique is Mzambique or Nzambi, just like Nzambi in the Congo tradition. So across the board, of course, in the Dogon tradition, you have Amma, which is Ame, the supreme being, manifesting male as well as female. So you have across the board the same title of Nyame from east to west. You even have in Tanzania the people who are called Nyamwezi people. You have divinities in South Afuraitkaitnut called Nyame. So you will find that version of Amen from East Africa across West, Central, and South. Same divinity from ancient times until now. Now there's a form of Nyame that you'll find in the hieroglyphic dictionary where it's spelled Ari Amen. So the medut for the I is written very often A-R-I or A-N-I. So it'd be Ari or Ani, meaning I. And then next to that medut are the medut for Amen. So that's a title of Amen, and you'll find that in the hieroglyphic dictionary. Ari, Amen. Now, Ari, in ancient Kemet, spelled A-R-I, representing the I, that's the word for I. There's another version of a medut that has the symbol for the I, and it's spelled A-N-I, so it's Ani, and it means beautiful and so forth, but it also references the I, and the symbol is the I. So you have Ani representing the I, and you also have Ari representing the I. That's important because this particular form of the divinity called Ari Amen, when you put that together, this is where you get Ariame, Ari Amen, Ariame, or Anyame. This is where we get Anyame or Anyame, Anyame, Onyame, and Nyame in Akan, in Herero, amongst the Lodzi, amongst the various people who use various versions of Anyame, Nyame, Onyame, Nyambe, Njambe, Nzambe, and so forth. Now the I, Ari, there's also another title of Amen in ancient Kemet where he's called Ani. This particular medut is a medut of a pillar, the same pillars that hold up the temples. So, and in fact, it's also the name of the sacred city of Ra in the north, which is today called Heliopolis, or near Cairo today, and the Greeks called it Heliopolis, or the city of the sun. In ancient Kemet, we called it Ani or On, and in Coptic, the late Kemet dialect is called On. Often in earlier times it would be Ani. There's an Ani Met, which is the northern Ani, and then the Ani Shema, or the southern Ani. The northern Ani, the northern region called Ani or An, is what they call Heliopolis, or the sacred city of Ra. The southern An Shema, the Greeks called it Hermonthis, and in Coptic it's called Ermont, and the Arabs still call it Ermont or Ermont. Sacred city of Mentu, Chinanet, Raet, also Amen, Amenet, and so forth. So you had those two sacred centers named An. You also had a number of divinities who used the title An, and when they use that title, they call themselves Ani. Adding the E is similar to adding Ish or Ik at the end of an English term like English or Gaelic. If somebody's speaking the Irish language, it would be Gaelic. So, if somebody said Akan-ik or Akan-ish, meaning you're like the Akan or you're from that region or that culture, adding the E at the end of it in the language of Kemet has the same function. So if somebody is of An, the region of An or the sacred city of An, or connected to that energy, they would be called Ani. In Coptic, it would be Ani. So Ani is a title of Amen. That particular Medut are the columns, the great columns that you see that look like great trees that hold, support the temples. They support the foundation of all things. Those great columns are basically the same as Amen, that which is fixed, stable, permanent, and abiding. These temples were built for eternity. They still stand after thousands of years, and they are supported by these great columns, and the columns were called An or Ani. An or Ani is the same phonetically as Ari, the I in front of the title of Amen called Ari Amen. So when you see Ari Amen, you're seeing Anyame, Anyame, Onyame, and so forth. You will find that some Akan people in Ivory Coast, instead of saying Onyame or Nyame, they say Niame. They pronounce it slightly different. So in Akan in Ghana, Onyame or Onyame. In Ivory Coast, sometimes it's Nyamewaa and sometimes it's Nyame. And there's one particular group that says Ni Amene, Ni Amene. So it's directly taken from the Ani of ancient Kemet. Just like Ani means I in ancient Kemet, Ari means I in Akan. A-N-I is the word for I in Akan. It also represents face and outer surface and so forth. But the general term for I is Ani or Ari or Eni. Eni in Akan meaning I, Eri or Ari in Akan, in Kemet meaning I. Ariame is a title of Amen, and this is where we get Anyame or Nyame in Akan. So it's a direct transmission from ancient Kanit to West Afuraitkaitnut. One of the problems that people have had when they're trying to look for the etymology of the name in the Akan language, they don't understand, first of all, that the root is Amen, and the N or Ni is connected to Amen, so it's Anyame. They don't understand that. They don't understand that Amen and Amenet are two divinities that we actually have pictures of and reliefs and sculptures of. But they also make the mistake of only looking in the Akan language for the root of the name. If they were to expand a little bit, they would see that everybody in the country surrounding the Akan, all the way further west to Senegal to the Atlantic coast, going back the coast of Bosom, Opo, and Epo Abena, the great mother and father of the ocean that Europeans call the Atlantic Ocean, going from Senegal all the way across West Afuraitkaitnut through Nigeria, through Cameroon, through Gabon, through the regions of the Kikongo, the Lodzi, and so forth, all the way to East Afuraitkaitnut. You will find various versions of Nyame, Nyambe, Njambe, Yambe, Zambe, Zambi, and so forth. So if they understood that and took that into account, they would have to look at these various languages and see, why is everybody using the same name for the Supreme Being? And when they look at the origins and the roots of those names and what it actually means, they will find that they're all tied back to Ariame, that form, that root, Ariame or Anyame in ancient Kemet, as a title of Amen. Okay, so any questions on that? I'm gonna get a drink of water right quick. All right, so we are going to put together an article going into detail about this information, about Amen and Amenet. We just wanted to put the video out first. So all these different etymological roots and linkages you will find in the article, we put a list of some of the divinities in the chat so you could see, and you could Google some of those, just so you can find, you can download lots of information just to verify this. But we wanted to go through those etymologies. So number one, you would see that it's a cultural continuity from ancient Khanate up into, of course, into Kemet, into the so-called Middle East, through North Afuraitkaitnut with the Black Berbers, through West Central Afuraitkaitnut and South Afuraitkaitnut, even down to the Zambezi or Nzambi River, and the people of that region. So you see that there's a cultural continuity. We never stop referring to the Supreme Being, as Nyame, Nyamewaa, and so forth. And many of these cultures still deal with the mother, wife, of the Supreme Being. So the Great Mother, who is the wife of the Supreme Being. So that you'll have Nyambe, or you have Nzame in Fang culture, and then you'll have Nasi Lele, who is the wife of Nzame. Or you have Nyambe, and you have the wife of Nyambe in other cultures. They still recognize the Great Mother as well as the Great Father. The only people who downplay the Great Mother or don't mention the Great Mother at all are the people who have been infected by Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and so forth. Okay, so any questions on that? Okay, and let me put something out there right quick. I'm gonna put the link to the okay, so the link we just put up is the link to the Okrawa complex, the soul of AKANFO, the book, because we go into detail about the cosmological basis of creation when we talk about Amen, Amenet, Kan, Kaet, Hehu and Hehut, Nu and Nut, and the emergence of Ra and Raet, but then their relationship to the Kra and the Okrawa, the Ka, the Kaet, the divine consciousness. Now that's key, because when we're talking about ritual practice, as we said earlier, we've been taught falsely that we don't deal directly with the Supreme Being in ancestral culture. So when people are repeating this kind of foolishness, it also affects their ritual practice and the people who listen to them. So then we get into the situation where we're just engaged in dealing with the discarnate, wayward, ancestral spirits that are not cultivated, just any spirits that are hanging around earthbound. We start engaging ritual towards them. Sometimes they help us in a certain situation, help us get through a certain situation, help us get some money, help us get a job or something like that, and we believe that we're dealing with the Abosom. And now people get confident and they think they understand cosmology. We have had a tradition before Christianity in this culture, before the whites and their offspring decided that, first they decided we couldn't be Christians, then they decided it was better to make us Christians because that would make us better slaves and better able to control. But before that process happened, the vast majority of our people who were brought to North America, as well as Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, were people who held on to their ancestral religions, real religion, NANASOM, various forms of NANASOM, ancient, authentic Afuraitkaitnut ancestral religion. And this was before a lot of the infection occurred, so people still understood that Nyamewaa and Nyame were mother and father, Chukwu and Komosu with the Great Father and the Great Mother. In earlier stories dealing with the Yoruba tradition, you'll find Olokun and Olorun being complementary opposites at the beginning of creation, before the created universe. It was the male and female, Olorun and Olokun. So you'll find, pre-Christianity in this hemisphere, when our people were brought over here, we were still practicing the traditions. And then we carry that consciousnness. Of course, we're influenced by our Nsamanfo. We carry that consciousness within us to this day. Even though a lot of us have been infected with a perversion of ancestral culture, we've been infected with the Eurocentric culture, we've been infected with Christianity and Islam and different forms of pseudo-esotericism and other kinds of foolishness like that. Certain things we have retained. So we know consciously, intuitively, in connection with our pra, that Nyame, God, Nyamewaa, Goddess, are real, and we invoke Nyame, Nyamewaa. Typically, we don't know the name, so we say, well, I prayed to God, and so forth. Often we don't deal with the goddess aspect, but we still have a consciousness that we communicate directly with the Supreme Being. And when we communicate directly with the Supreme Being, and the Supreme Being communicates directly to us through our pra, then it is Nyamewaa and Nyame who direct us to which Abosom govern certain activities, or direct us to the function of the Nsamanfo in our lives. So it's not a situation where we just go to the Nsamanfo, go to the Egun, go to the Kuvito, and ask for, favors, or ask for, children to be born healthy or whatever. We do that, but we get the information from Nyamewaa and Nyame, and then we're directed to which Abosom govern which activities. We have a direct connection to the Supreme Being. If we listen to, and this is something that we've carried in our moja as we were forcibly transported to the Western Hemisphere, but through our ancestresses and ancestors, our ancestral moja, our ancestral blood, we still have this knowledge, this clear notion that we communicate directly with Nyamewaa and Nyame, in addition to the Abosom and the NANASOM and Samanfo. Then we come in contact with people who say, no, well, the Supreme Being is just a hierarchy of energy. You don't really deal with that. Supreme Being doesn't talk directly to you. It's only the deities or the Unsamanfo. And some people say they're not even any deities. Really, it's only ancestral spirits that you're really communicating with. And everything else is just anthropomorphic representations of what's inside of you. So there are really not any deities outside of you. Everything is inside of you. When you hear that kind of information, or you see people talk about, the Tumi, or the Ashe, the force, divine force in creation, the creative force, the life force energy that animates all created entities, the deities are just mythological representations of Ashe, or Tumi, or life force energy, and we just created stories around them to try to learn and understand how energy moves in nature and how we can take advantage of it. Like electricity or electromagnetic energy, like an engineer or a physicist would learn how energy works and moves, or magnetism or gravity and so forth, and then use that energy to create appliances or machinery and so forth. When you hear people saying that the deities are just creations, you're dealing with people who don't have any knowledge of the culture. That includes people who are priests and priestesses, who were initiated by people on the continent, who were infected with false traditions, who have been heavily infected with Islam over the past 1,000 plus years, going back to Timbuktu. And, back during that time, we had been infected then. That's why there was this Islamic scholarship happening in Timbuktu and other regions in that area. We had already been infected even 1,000 years ago. So when we carry some of that information to the forest belt, and whereas Ghana and Nigeria and Togo and Benin and so forth, Ivory Coast now, and then some of us are taken from those regions and brought to America, there's over a 1,000 plus year corruption that some of our people have carried. Some of the people on the continent now who are, purported to be elders, elderesses, can talk about 30 generations of their families dealing with the culture and being priests and priestesses. If you deal with 30 generations, that'll take you back up into the region of, ancient Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, in the time frame where people were already corrupted. So if you say I have, if a generation, like we said before, if a generation is, say, 20 years, if you call it one generation 20 years, well, 10 generations is 200 years. 20 generations is 400 years. So, 40 generations is 800 years. 50 generations is 1,000. So you're only going back 50 generations, you're only going back to 1,000 years ago when people were still corrupted back then. Most of them won't say they have 50 generations of culture. They'll say, as far back as we can remember, hundreds of years ago, 10, 12, 20 generations going back, we've been priests and priestesses. That just means you're descended from a lineage very often of people who were corrupted by Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and sometimes some forms of Hinduism or Buddhism generations ago, and now you're passing the infection on. So our innate sense of direct connection with Nyamewaa and Nyame as our great father, great grandfather, great grandmother, we subordinate that reality to somebody on the continent who says, no, you shouldn't do that, you can't do that, or somebody from here who's been misinformed, and they tell us, no, that's not really what you should be doing, because, you know, in reality, that's just symbolic, and the Supreme Being is just a representation of nature, and that's it. When you hear people talking like that, publishing things like that, teaching things like that, understand that you're dealing with people who don't understand the culture. Your Okra knows the Supreme Being. Like we said before, you have a direct line of energy of Tumi directly to Nyamewaa and Nyame. All created entities, created with a capital C, who came into being under the inspiration of Nyamewaa and Nyame, meaning Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people, plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth. All of us are on the web of Anansi. Anansi weaves that Tumi of energy, that web of energy, that web of Tumi that permeates the black substance of space, and each one of us are connected to one of those lines of energy on that web, and it connects directly from our Akra directly to Nyamewaa and Nyame. But then the other lines connect to the other Abosom, to other Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people, to plant life, animal life, mineral life, the planet, sun, moon, and stars. So therefore we are all connected to created entities, and we can communicate, exchange, and so forth, just like your organs and cells are all connected to one another through the nervous system and through the circulatory system and immune system and so forth. Okay, so any questions on any of that information? Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Any comments? Okay, I see somebody said about the commercials. I don't know if you, I think with the commercials you might have to, I don't know what kind of account you have. I think that with the regular account you sign up for and get a username and so forth, I think the commercials still happen, but they pick up, you know, they pick up right where you left off. I'm not sure. I would have to check into it to see about whether or not you can, you know, block commercials from the webcast. I know that when the webcasts are saved and uploaded to YouTube, the commercials don't cut into the material and cut the material off. It doesn't include those, so you never miss any of the information when you're watching the rebroadcast or the recording on YouTube. Okay. All right, so any other questions, questions or comments on Nyamewaa and Nyame, or just the nature of the Supreme Being in general? I'm going to put another link up here. Okay, so we have a Ning site, Afuraikai.ning.com, which is a network that we own. It's similar to Facebook, but it's something it's a private network. We own it. People who are studying this kind of information are connected. We have forum discussions. We send out emails. Anything that's upcoming, we put it on the website, and people can learn different things. We put all our books and videos and everything else on that as well. Okay, so I had a question. How can we make offerings to these Abosom? So we're talking about for example, the Kradin Bosom. You'll look through, we have an article dealing with each one of the Kradin Bosom, their functions in nature, ritual colors and so forth. And let me put the link to that right quick. Okay, so on the Akradin Bosom page on the website, we have an article on each one of the Kradin Bosom that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the Akan 7-day week, and also govern our Kradin, our soul name. So my soul's name is Kwesi because I'm born on a Akwesi Da, which is the day or Da of Akwesi or Awusi, which is Sunday. The Abosom is Awusi or Asi, which is Asar in ancient Kemet. So my soul is named after Awusi or Akwesi, Asar, because I'm born on his day under the governance of that celestial body, which is the sun. So I carry that energy of Awusi. So we have an article on all of the different Kradin Bosom. There are 11 that are part of that particular grouping or system of Abosom. Of course, there are hundreds of Abosom, but that particular grouping, the Akradin Bosom, we have a page specifically dealing with them. We talk about their function and nature, their ritual colors, their relationship to other Abosom. You can find different ritual offerings when you study their manifestations in two ways. Study their manifestations in ancient Kemet. Sometimes we mention the different animals and different plant life and so forth that's connected with them, but you can study their manifestations in ancient Kemet. But then the second way, the most direct way, is because many people are not dealing with actual Abosom, whether it's on the continent or here, they're dealing with deified ancestral spirits that may or may not actually be related to people. The second way is when you develop a relationship with your NANASOM and Samanfo and your Kra and the Abosom that are connected to your blood circle. Starting off though with establishing an ancestral shrine and communicating with your direct blood ancestresses and ancestors. It is through them that you will be led to the specific offerings beyond just reading about them in ancient Kemet or reading some information about Akan, Abosom of Yoruba, Orisha, or the Vodou, or Arusi and Igbo. And you can find that kind of information, you can read up on it, you can connect with people who are initiated into the traditions. But the most direct way to learn is going to your Nsamanfo and getting direct information. First, you must develop a relationship with your great-great-grandparents who are in the ancestral realm, who are in Asamando. And they already try to communicate on a regular basis anyway. They're always trying to communicate. The Abosom who are connected with you are always trying to communicate. So you've had communications. Sometimes you don't identify them as communications from the Abosom. Every now and then people will identify something that has happened and they got some assistance. They'll say, well, that was nothing but God, or they'll say, well, God helped me this time, or whatever. Often it's, of course, it's Nyamewaa and Nyame directing the Abosom to assist you, a specific Abosom, one or more, or specific Nsamanfo to assist you, and the Nsamanfo, your ancestresses and ancestors, will assist you. So you have communications, you have experiences. Now you need to really be able to understand these experiences, the nature of these experiences, who's who you're working with, who you shouldn't be working with, and they will give you information in various ways about specifics with regard to what kind of offering you need to give. But it first starts, the first offering is, your attention and your spirit and you sitting down and listening with them. They give you information through dreams, they'll give you information at the shrine itself, they'll give you information through your Chinebwa, your animal totems, which they will show you, and they'll direct you to information and people who know about the information to confirm the things that you get from the shrine spiritually. They'll direct you to people who can confirm it physically, so you'll know that what you heard was accurate. But you deal with the Nsamanfo first. They'll direct you, even once you have a relationship with them that's solid, you'll be able to go into a grocery store or marketplace and you'll know which fruits and vegetables that you need to offer. If you need to get some ginger, if you need to get onions or something like that. For example, there was a time when I first started dealing with the ancestral shrine years ago. I didn't know anything about the culture. I've heard about some things, read about some things, seen people in the Yoruba tradition give different offerings of certain kinds of food or whatever. So I developed a relationship with my Nsamanfo. They directed me to get some onions to put on the shrine. Now, at that particular time, I had never seen or heard of anybody giving that. I usually saw people giving some rice or, whatever they give in the Yoruba tradition or even in certain other traditions. But of course, I followed what my Nsamanfo was saying, and then later on, much later, I come across information in ancient Kemet talking about onions were a major offering to the ancestral spirits at certain kinds of shrines. So that was just an example of my Nsamanfo communicating with me. I didn't have a lot of experience dealing with them at that particular time. They gave me something specific to give, something specific to the culture, something I didn't know anything about. And then later on, I was able to confirm physically. I went ahead and did that because I knew that's what they wanted, but I was able to confirm physically what they had given me spiritually. And you'll have those kinds of experiences. We also, for example, we mentioned this, it's on the website, on the Ning site, another example, not dealing with offerings per se, but there was an experience we had a number of years ago where the Nsamanfo informed us that mice are messengers from Asaase Afua, and they come up from the earth to bring messages from the Nsamanfo into the community. Now, I was given that information a number of years ago from the Nsamanfo. About 10 years later, over 10 years later, I was on a website looking up divination, and I find that in Ivory Coast, amongst some Akan, they have a divinatory practice. It's called mouse divination. They have a particular shrine where they put some implements, some sticks and different things, ritual items inside this container, inside this vessel, and then they put the mice in the vessel, and the mice move around. They move the sticks around, and based on how the sticks are placed by the mice, they can find out what the spirits, the Nsamanfo and the Abosom, are trying to communicate. It's a divinatory practice. And when you look at the origin of the mouse divination system, they say that in Akan culture, according to the Akan people in Ivory Coast, they say that mice used to be able to speak a very long time ago, and then one day a ritual specialist, AKANFO, went out into the forest, brought some mice into the village, and began utilizing them for mouse divination because they were messengers of Asaase Afua, the Earth Mother, and they come up to bring messages from the NANASOM and Nsamanfo. So they began to use them in a divinatory fashion. Now, I got that information from my Nsamanfo, as that was a form of divination. They said they came up from Asaase Afua, the Earth Mother, to bring the messages of the Nsamanfo, and that's why mice are used in a divinatory fashion. Over 10 years later, we come in contact with this information on the internet, talking about specifically Akan people dealing with mouse divination, and the same explanation of they're coming from Asaase Afua, the Earth Mother, to bring messages of the Nsamanfo to the people. Now, we didn't have that information before, but that's the Nsamanfo giving us specific information, specific to our cultural group, not just something that's, common and general across Afuraitkaitnut. Anywhere you go, you'll find mouse divination. You'll find that amongst the Akan in a certain region, connected with the Senufo, some of those people in that region, and outside of that, we hadn't found it anywhere else. So they gave us specific information, specifically related to the cosmology and divinatory practice to my specific ethnic group, and then over 10 years later, we get the details. So the Nsamanfo will give you specific information related directly to your family, to your blood circle, what specific offerings you need to give, because you may have, some Akan people might, or a Yoruba person might sacrifice a goat for a specific, ritual that they're engaged in. And if you go get divination from somebody and they're just somebody who was trained by somebody who was infected, and they know when this particular Odu falls, then that means that this particular Orisha needs a goat is asking for a goat to be sacrificed, and then you go and get this divination, they say, well, you need to appease this Orisha, you need a four-legged sacrifice, and they're going to sacrifice a goat. But if you happen to be from the Bosom Afran Ntoro, meaning your patrilineally inherited Abosom is not a Bosom Afran, then you would know that Abiriche, the goat, is a sacred animal. It's an Achineboa for your clan, and to kill a goat is like killing a family member, and that's a major echiwadie, or a taboo. But if you didn't know that, you would just go along because somebody in an African traditional religion did some divination and said, well, this is what we do. So we need to know specifically what group we come from, what our clan is, and what offerings are specific to us. There are certain offerings within a certain Akan clan that are different from offerings in another Akan clan. We can learn some of these things, of course, from some people on the continent or people who have gone back and forth, but the most direct way to learn what's specific to your family is to communicate with your family. And it is a process. It doesn't take years. You're establishing a shrine and starting to deal with the NANASOM and Samafo, it begins to happen rather quickly, rather swiftly. You'll notice certain things, you'll notice you're getting certain information, and you'll be on your way with that. Okay, any other questions on that? Or any other topics that we covered? Okay, if not, we're going to end it right here, but we will be publishing a document specifically on Nyamewaa and Nyame. This particular broadcast was just a summary of the information, just so we could drive home the point that Nyamewaa and Nyame do exist. They're entities, they're conscious living, reasoning entities. They are the Great Mother and the Great Father. They give birth to the other Abosom. We are their direct children. We have a direct connection to them. We do actively worship them, invoke them on a regular basis. They're not just a hierarchy of energy. Nyame has its etymological origins in the term name Ame and Amenet, and we show that Nyame, coming from Ariame or Anyame from ancient Kemet, goes from eastern part of Afuraitkaitnut through central, south, and west Afuraitkaitnut, and in the north. And we have never stopped worshiping this, the Great Supreme Being, Mother and Father, at any time. Okay, so, but we will give, a detailed analysis of all that information, plus more that we weren't able to share tonight in the upcoming article. In the meantime, you can check out we already put the link up for the Akradin Bosom. We also put the link up for the AKANFO NANASOM page. You can also go to our on the YouTube page, the Odwirafo YouTube page. We have all of our videos posted there, and we also have the videos posted on the Ning site. You can also, when you check out the Nhoma site, where it says odwirafo.com/Nhoma, the link we placed there, that is the link to the Okrawa, the concept of the soul, the soul of AKANFO book. It is a free download, but there's a section where you can make achedie or donations. At some point, very soon, we will be publishing the hard copy of that journal. Right now, we're just trying to generate funds so we can produce the hard copies. So if you want to make an achedie, a donation contribution, you can do that through that page. But the PDF book is free. You don't have to make a donation in order to download the book. You can download the book at any time, and feel free to share the book with those people who you feel will be interested. We also have an AKANFO NANASOM group on Facebook, so you can check us out there. We are Afuraitkaitnut on Facebook. All right, so any other questions? If not, we're going to end it here. And we'd just like to say, Merase, thank you for coming out and checking us out. And we will be sending out emails. Our next event coming up, most likely it will be next Benada, next Tuesday, or it may be on the following Kwesi the next Sunday. So we will be sending invites out to let people know, update people about the event. All right, may I say.